I have a lot of really cool friends who do a lot of really cool things. I wanted to make it a goal to sit down with these friends and spend about 15 minutes or so getting to know them better and find out about their past, present, and their future. The result is this show. My name is Grant Baciocco, and this is 15 Minutes With. Jim Cushinery, aka Cush, is a filmmaker, a musician, a photographer, a podcaster, and he just does it all. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here.
It's great to be here.
You're one of the original LA podcasters.
I am.
Yeah.
I started off, I want to say May of 2000. When was the first year? Was it 2005 or 2006?
The very end of 2004 is when I first heard
Okay,
about
so
it.
yeah, that was like the Don and Drew starting time. Yeah, so
Right.
It was like May of 2005 then. I started the Things I Say podcast.
Yeah. The back when we were all hand coding our RSS feeds and all that stuff. Well, we will get to podcasting, but I want to back up a little bit. Where did you grow up?
Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And what was, growing up, what was kind of the first creative thing that hooked you as a kid?
Gosh, I like to keep my age a secret, but my brother, who is older than I, sat all of us siblings down one Sunday night in front of the Ed Sullivan Show and said, "You must watch this." He was a teenager at the time. And it was that February night when the Beatles came out. And I looked at all of those, like, shiny guitars and the hair and heard all those chicks screaming, and I went, that's for me.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you start music shortly after that? Like, did you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Everyone in all of my siblings play instruments. A couple of violinists, a cellist, a pianist, and me. I play. I got a guitar. My first guitar when I was 9 years old. That was a few years later. We always started off with in like the third or fourth grade playing the recorder, and so that was always your intro to music, education. And so when I guess 9 years old, I got a guitar from Walgreens, $18 it cost. My parents were very happy that we bought that one instead of the $15 one. They thought this one was much better.
That $3
made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And I basically sat there playing it till I bled. They gave me a book, Mel Bay's guitar method, showed you chords and how to play, and I tried to figure them out. And honestly, it was like pulling on these metal white ropes just to try to get the strings down to the frets. And my calluses are still. I have no feeling in my left hand.
Tips of your fingers.
Yeah.
Were you playing like just folk songs, or were you picking out songs on the radio, or?
Well, to start with, it was whatever was. Yeah, it was like I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy or whatever, campfire songs. So whatever was in the Mel Bay book, that's what I started with. And then my sister had sheet music for her piano, and they had guitar chords in the sheet music, and it'd be stuff like Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, stuff like that, current pop songs.
Yeah. And you mentioned your siblings were all playing instruments. Were your parents creative as well?
Well, that's a funny thing. They had a hard time musically playing the radio, but my dad, he was a welder, mechanic sort of guy, and it wasn't till he passed away in like the 90s that I realized that he was actually creative. He had this creative side in that if he needed a tool for a job, many times he would build the tool himself. He could visualize, and if the tool wasn't available commercially, he'd make it.
Yeah.
So he was creative in that way.
Right. And so growing up and playing from age 9 in, say, high school and stuff, were you in the band, or were you doing like your own garage band type stuff?
Both.
Yeah.
Well, when I was my next oldest brother, both of my brothers played violin in the orchestra, and when I was in the 6th grade, I got a bass guitar, and we had our first band that we played at our 6th grade graduation. And so when I went into 7th grade, when you could get into the orchestra, I was immediately put on the upright bass. And for some reason, they never made me go have lessons because they knew I knew how to play through my brother, I guess. And I just kind of got thrown into the orchestra at first, and then I also picked up the saxophone and got thrown into the band. And then we had a thing called the jazz ensemble, and from that we formed a little splinter group called the rock ensemble, and we'd play whatever long hair 70s rock we could. And that core group from the rock ensemble, like some of us are still playing together today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And because you were in a band, I mean, I don't know your full history, but you were in a band called the Wigs.
Yeah, that was my band right out of high school.
Right out of high school. And the album that you put on iTunes, a year or so ago, is really great. It's really fantastic. What was the genesis? Was that the people from the rock ensemble getting together?
Well, at that time it was just the drummer from the rock ensemble, Bobby Tews, and I, and another high school friend, junior high and high school friend, Bob Packner. He was a pianist, but he also played the bass. So, and then we, in 1980, we drafted in our friend that we met from Rockford, Illinois, Marty Ross. So the idea was we wanted to have as close to the Beatles sort of thing as possible, where we'd have multiple singers, and there wasn't just like a front man with a backing band. We wanted to have as many personalities out front as possible. And so we toured around the Midwest a bit. And our booking agent started a record label called Streetwise, and it's not the famous Streetwise punk rock label. It was just a different one. And they wanted us to record an album. There was a recording studio in Waupun, Wisconsin, which was down the block from the state prison. And we recorded that album. It's called File Under Pop Vocal. We recorded that in that studio. And the version that's out on iTunes now, that was released in 1981. The version that's out on iTunes now, we remixed. We went back to the original 16-track tapes and had them digitized, which was quite a process out here. And we remixed it, and we included 2 songs that didn't make it onto the original vinyl. And the only reason they weren't included is because you had time limits of 18 minutes per side with the vinyl. And one track, it's called Popular Girl, we hated it. It was recorded specifically to try to get on the radio station, the FM station in Milwaukee. And it worked. They played it, I'm sure, 2 or 3 times. But it was never that breakout thing, and it was really not. It stood out on the album as something that was just not our sound.
Yeah.
But it was a calculated effort to get airplay that kind of backfired. So we re-engineered the song. It's still the same tracks, but we re-engineered it to more fit with the rest of the record and the tone of the band. So we kind of fixed history.
And where did music take you after the Wigs? Because didn't you've toured all over, haven't you?
Right.
Yeah,
well, the Wigs, we sort of hit a ceiling in Wisconsin. Our record was released the same day that the Police released Ghost in the Machine, and we actually locally and regionally we charted higher than Ghost in the Machine, and we outsold them too. And we were like number 1 on college radio, but in 1981 that meant nothing. I mean, in the 90s it would have made you Nirvana,
right?
But for then we just hit this ceiling. We couldn't do anything, so we moved to California, and we got drafted into being in this movie called My Chauffeur. And we have that actually, it's funny because we have a history. We have 2 different sorts of crowds. We have the Milwaukee Wigs fan base, and then like the rest of the world fan base, because we sort of like left behind the File Under Pop Vocal songs a bit, even though one of them is in the My Chauffeur soundtrack. And then there was the rest of the world knew us from that movie, and we have fans all around the world that we also last year or the year before we put out the soundtrack finally. That we'd had people begging us since the 80s. They wanted the soundtrack, but it was never available. We finally just made it available, and we sell it all over the world.
Was it a hard decision? Like, did you all decide to get, like, it was easy? Like, hey, we're all going to California, or was there like some battles there? Like, no, we can't.
It wasn't an easy decision because we were sort of on top of a world. Our last gig that we played at this place called Summerfest, it's the world's largest music festival, we had a crowd of like 5,000 people.
Right.
And they were like begging us not to leave. Don't leave town, don't leave town. Well, Marty, my writing partner, stayed in Milwaukee. I went with Bobby, the drummer, and Bob Packner went off to, he had already quit the band before that. But we came out to L.A., and I saw what was going on there. To me, we would go to the clubs just to check out the music scene, and I saw a bunch of bands that were. You'd see these bands playing in a place like the Roxy or someplace like that, and it would be their first gig ever, and they're playing. They just don't know how to work a room, and I just called Marty and said, "You got to get out here. We can eat this town up."
Yeah.
And so he came out, and sure enough, I mean, we had not knocked off so many like things on the list in such like rapid succession. It was almost boring. Like we got a lawyer who was he was Ringo Starr's lawyer. We had Van Halen's manager. We were represented by CAA without a record deal, and we're just knocking it off, the things right off the list, because we showed up and we knew how to work a room from like touring, and the people in Hollywood didn't know what hit them. They were like, "Holy crap! This is like, where did you guys come from?" And well, we came from the Midwest, and and we just had a lot of experience under our belt, and it showed, and it really eased our way into the world. In fact, the director of My Show First saw us at what is now the Viper Room, and approached us and said, "We'd like to put us in his film," and we were like, yeah. Like, people tell us that all the time. He said, no, where's your next gig? And we wanted to bring his producer down with him, and he did. He showed up, which was a miracle, I thought, and he loved us. We ended up putting 8 songs in the soundtrack, and the film went to #1 at the box office. And it sparked a controversy because it knocked The Color Purple off the #1 spot, and it sparked a whole controversy about how box office is reported and how all the studios lie about their box office. But that's its place in infamy. But we got notice from all like the press, like People magazine singled us out, saying we're about the best thing in the film, and Billboard magazine, and all the papers, they all mentioned us, which was a pretty unusual thing.
Right. To talk about a band that's in the film,
right,
as opposed to
the film
itself.
Right. So we used that, we milked it. We got noticed by CBS Records, and they put us in the studio. They gave us, at the time, I was a producer who had worked with Rick Springfield. They gave us Prince's engineer, and they just threw a ton of money at us. And it's a kind of a tragic story, because the head of West Coast A&R came down to listen to our final product. And I'm not kidding you, he showed up to the studio. This is the 80s. Okay, he showed up with hookers and blow. And we listened to it. It was all smiles. And last thing he said to us when he walked out was, "Put your wish list together." And we were like celebrating, because, oh my God, we did it. We were going to be like assigned to this big record deal. And Ted Turner decided to try to buy CBS, all of it. And they had their worst Black Friday in history. And everyone associated with our project got fired, and we had nobody there to shepherd us through, and we just kind of fell away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after the Wigs, what was your direction after that?
I started another band called 57 Braves, which was a nod to the 1957 Braves championship team in Milwaukee, and we were doing kind of roots rock sort of stuff, but it never really caught fire for me, because Marty had gone on to other pursuits, and I had lost my creative foil. So I was really calling all the shots, and I was just dialing it in. So I went off music for a while. I just lost my mojo for it, and I started working in the film business. and I never went to film school or anything like that, but I worked at a place early on called Canon Films. At the time was the biggest independent film producer in the world, actually. And it was the type of place where they didn't pay very well, but it was like going to film school. You learned everything. And I've literally done everything there is to do in the film business as a result of working at Canon. Everything from writing content, producing, shooting, directing, acting in things, editing, post-production, learning how to do the sound work, and even I worked in marketing and distribution. I've literally covered the gamut of the filmmaking experience. Now, I'm not an expert in any one thing, but I have a broad enough knowledge that when I'm producing something of my own, I can talk to each department head on their level, and they know that because they know that I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So my focus then for being able to make a living, I went out on the road with a band called Fisher. We were signed to Interscope Records. And when that concluded, I needed to make a living. And I called up friends of mine who used to work at Canon, and I said, I need a job. Is there anything you've got? And they said, well, do you know Pro Tools? I said, of course I do. And I got into the world of doing sound design, especially for film trailers, which was it's its own unique world. And every time this company would get in a long-form project, it came to me. Because the guy who I reported to wasn't interested in long-form at all. He just wanted to do trailers and TV spots. So I did a bunch of documentaries and some other narrative stuff. And it was while I was at that place, I got my first opportunity to direct something. It was a short film called Blue Bunny, which is a parody of the Vincent Gallo movie, The Brown Bunny, and the infamous scene, the climax of the film, if you will. And I was in hog heaven. I just fell in love with directing. And I'm not a technical director. I really focus on the performance with the actors. And I don't even like, on film set, thanks to Jerry Lewis, they have what's called the video village, where you can watch what the camera sees on a big monitor. And a lot of people will sit behind that in the video village and direct from that point of view. And I don't like being detached from the actors. I like to see what their eyes are doing, and I like to hear it with my own ears, not over the headphones. I let the technical people worry about if there's something went wrong that way, and then I'll review it. But I'm really more focused on the performance, which I think gets back to being a musician and being focused so much on live performance. That seems to make sense to me. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about podcasting.
Yes.
And where did you first hear about podcasting and decide, like, oh, I'm going to do a show?
I heard about podcasting. I don't know where, to tell you the truth. It just came up in the news somewhere, and I'm sure it had to be an interview with Dawn and Drew, because they were like the first media darlings. They got into that lucky slip where all the media went to them. They were the go-to thing for Newsweek and everything. And I checked it out. And what is this podcasting business after all? And it just really spoke to me, because I'm a bit of a chatterbox and an oversharer, as some people might say. And I just thought, this seems like a really good fit for me. I had written an online novel called A Year of Living Stupidly, which was intended to be a multimedia thing before multimedia was cool. And really, the tech didn't exist to produce it to the way I intended. And that had sprung out of something I just kept joking with people, saying, this is going to be in my book called Things I Say. And that Things I Say was always this book of just little quippy sort of things, little random thoughts. And when podcasting came out, I went, well, this is a perfect outlet for things I say, and I turned the little non-existent novel into the podcast, and I refined it, and I used a lot of music to punctuate my points, and it was sort of a collage of sorts. That's the best way I can describe it. My very first episode, I interviewed people, and I only did two other interviews. Other than that, it was just me rambling.
Yeah, they were. I mean, you are still a great storyteller, and I always would look forward to new episodes because you knew you were going to get a good story, and you also your shows it wasn't an hour and a half of you talking. It was a good story, and it was like this good little story that you would tell, and then some music, and I don't know. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it was a half hour, and Dan Class from The Bitterest Pill once said to me, "How do you make it exactly a half hour every time?" And I said, "Well, first I decide as a producer I'm going to make a 30-minute show, and then I make it fit."
Right.
Because his style is a little more flexible.
Right.
And Dan, by the way, is the one who gave me my entire audience. I'm not even sure how he heard about me. I may have heard about him and emailed him and said, "Hey, check out my show." And he gave me a plug on his show, and it broke my server. And I had to afterwards. I had to look for a new server service that had unlimited bandwidth.
Yeah.
Right. And his crowd was so big, they just tuned in, and he was so gracious to do that. He really talked me up, and he's actually responsible for me having anybody but friends and family.
Well, and as happens in podcasting, you sort of moved away from it a little bit. Other real life intervened, but now you've brought it back. But you've completely changed the format in that you're doing it on YouTube.
Yeah, the reason I walked away from it is I was never able to monetize it, and I was trying to get my own film and television projects off the ground. I was still trying to chase down money. I had started a charity, and there's only 24 hours in a day, and I'm married, and I have a wife that deserves attention also, and something had to go, and everything really got organized in terms of what's making money and what's not. Top of the list, the podcast was not making any money. The charity wasn't making any money. It wasn't ever designed to, but I had to reconfigure the charity so it almost runs itself. It's only fired up for when a project comes up. It's not like anybody's taking a salary, and we're not always begging for money. It only works because what it does is we put apprentices on film sets. So it's project specific. When a project comes up, we find a way of raising the funds to operate just for that project, and then we go away when the project's done. So I just had to clear out my schedule and make money, especially after 2008. It became really, when the economy tanked, it just became very necessary to really focus on making a living. And in 2015, with all these deaths we've had, David Bowie especially, I made some comment on Facebook, and someone commented and said that my comment sounded like a great topic for things I say, hint, hint. And I agreed, it really would be, but I still just didn't have the time to devote, because to do a half-hour show, those shows took me part-time a week each to make, because there was research, there was writing involved, and then a lot of post-production. And I just couldn't devote that kind of time to it. So trying to think out of the box, I looked at, what could I do that's not going to encroach on my day as much as possible, but still do this? And the idea came to me as I was going to buy a GoPro camera, and I'll turn it into a YouTube thing just because YouTube is so much easier to deal with as far as being a server for the content. And whereas Things I Say, the podcast, was originally like a view into, or a look at my world view through my words, I bought this little strap-on thing that holds the camera on my chest. And so now you're getting an actual worldview of mine, or you're getting an actual view of my worldview, and I do it while I'm doing anything else. I'll do it while I'm washing dishes or making food or going out for walks, as long as I can multitask and not like devote hard time to the podcast. I'm good with it. And I streamlined it down to about 10 to 15 minutes per, just because there's no music involved anymore. And it's just me talking about one thought. And it can be a complex thought. Like when I leave here today, I'm putting out a 3-parter about holding grudges. But they're 3 individual thoughts that stand on their own. But when you tie them together, you get this nice triptych of a through line, and hopefully it pays off.
Yeah. Well, I'll put a link in the show notes so people can check it out.
Thank you.
And we need to wrap it up here, but I wanted to talk about your photography, because you take amazing photos. Is that something you've loved all along, or is that a more recent thing that you've fallen into?
That actually is an offshoot of my directing. As I said, I'm not a technically savvy director, but I understand the importance of knowing visual composition. And the photography was born out of wanting to be able to talk to my cinematographer on a more educated level. I wanted to be able to communicate to my DP and, on more accurate terms than rather, it needs to look happier. I wanted to be able to give him feedback, and I also wanted to have the conversation about, well, let's have this person, let's be angling up at this person, this character, to put them in a dominant position in this scene. So things like, there's a whole lot to learn in there. Well, so I started off by taking pictures of a friend who is a model, and as it turns out, I really enjoy portraiture. And I've kind of got an eye for it, and I've been published a few times, and I've made a little money at it, and so I'm pursuing it like all these other things, but I need to be able to make money from it. And most recently, I spoke to a friend who owns an art gallery, and I'd never ever shown him my work before. I've been doing it for like 3.5 years now, and it's funny. Friends will look at something and they'll say, "Oh my God, that's so wonderful! You should do a show." And I looked at my work and said, "No, this is so not ready. I'm thankful for the support, but this is not ready to show." And besides that, to do a photographic show is hugely expensive, because the type of prints you need to do are anywhere from $50 to $300 each just to make the prints. But finally, I sent a link to one of my websites for photography to my friend, the art gallery owner, and he got back to me and said he really liked my stuff, and he's got some ideas for venues for me. So I'm looking into that world now too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, if people want to follow you online and check out all your stuff, where can they go?
Let's try Instagram. If you want to see some photography, is Cush Images. And you can go to cushimage.com to see more commercial type photography. YouTube the channel is called Other W, because my production company is called Other World Distractions. But if you look up things I say on YouTube, you'll be able to find it. But those are my links. That's my profile. And I guess on Facebook it's Cush Images too.
Awesome. Well, I will put links to all this in the show notes. And Jim, thank you so much for talking to me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Grant. It's wonderful.
Jim Cushinery, or Cush as we call him, is a musician, filmmaker, podcaster, and photographer, and it was great talking to him on this episode of 15 Minutes With. Check out Cush's pictures over at cushimage.com or on Instagram, where his handle is cushimages with an S. Also, check out the brand new iteration of Cush's podcast, Things I Say, as well as see some of his film projects over on his YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/otherw. And if you'd like to hear even more of my conversation with Cush that didn't make it into this episode, download the free Saturday Morning Media app for iOS and Android and check out the entry for this episode. For more information, visit SaturdayMorningMedia.com/app. Much thanks to Cush for being on this episode. 15 Minutes with On the GrantCast is a production of Saturday Morning Media and made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a monthly donation for as little as $1 a month. Huge thanks to Shay Stewart, Mer Lafferty, Jeff Peterson, Dale Gadania, Steven Staver, Jackie Klimo, Melissa Crawford, Chuck, Matthew Wayne Selznick, Dave Slusher of the Evil Genius Chronicles, Mike Coughlin, Dorothy Baciocco, John D., Kathy Crawford, Brian Greer, Kerry Whitney, Chuck Tomasi, Chris Foster, Stephen Ing, Clinton of ComedyForecast.com, Vicky DeVries, Mike Wabshall, and Twitter user Buttsinggear, aka Wildcat. If you'd like to support this show and the other fun content from Saturday Morning Media, become a patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up your donation today. That's www.patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media. You can also tell a friend about the show or leave the show a review on iTunes. And if you have feedback for the show, you can send it to me directly at grant@throwingtoasters.com or get in touch via Twitter, where my username is ToasterBoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back in another week with a brand new episode. The GrantCast is copyright 2016 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.